Hi, I'm Tammy Barnes. I work for the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service, and I'm an extension associate and a nutrient management planner. So today I'm going to talk about nutrient management plans. So basically, what a nutrient management plan is helps farmers make decisions to have a better nutrient balance on farm. So we have inputs and outputs. And as you can see here, our inputs are feed animals fertilizer, legumes irrigation, that goes to the animals or the crops and comes out as our managed outputs that are animals, crops, and manure. So when we have imbalances, we have nutrient losses or additions, which we'll talk about, especially with phosphorus, of storage into the soil storage. So basically, we want to decrease the imbalances and kind of keep a very zero loss of nutrients to the environment. So doing a nutrient management plan will help farmers make decisions to make decisions on farm to prevent these imbalances and the associated water risks. So let's first talk about nutrient management plans and animal manure. So in the state of Kentucky, a Kentucky State Nutrient Management Plan actually refers to land application of animal manure or compost. So as we see in this slide here, is that depending on how the manure is treated, if it has bedding or no bedding, if it's in a pit or if it's covered, that there are nutrient changes between treatments and between species. We can always see that beef stock are a little higher in nitrogen in their manure than dairy cattle, which makes perfect sense. Here's horses, poultry, depending on whether it's a broiler or a layer or a turkey, will have different types of nutrients in their feces. Sheep, we don't really worry about too much in Kentucky. We have very few sheep. We have swine, depending on how they're managed, but most of ours are managed in a lagoon or a liquid pit underneath the floor. And it also depends on the age of the species. So obviously, growing animals are going to have a higher nitrogen and phosphorus content in their fecal material than a lactating sow or a growing, like a pregnant sow. So I just wanted to make everybody aware that just because it's animal manure, it's very different depending on the species. Being that our nutrient management plan in the state of Kentucky is basically like a manure management plan in other states. So in our state, we recognize two plans. So our Kentucky Nutrient Management Plan, which is actually a part of the Ag Water Quality Plan, is a manure management plan. Another type of nutrient management plan is called a comprehensive nutrient management plan. And a comprehensive nutrient management plan is actually a federal plan, and we'll see this in other states for what they call CAFOs, so confined animal feeding operations with large animals, and it's dependent on the state whether you need one of these or not. In the state of Kentucky, we don't consider that we have CAFOs, so by federal law, we don't need a comprehensive nutrient management plan until there's a problem. So we want to kind of stay away from this. But a comprehensive nutrient management plan can only be written by a technical service provider that is accredited through the NRCS. So our Kentucky Nutrient Management Plan is just like every other state that has in the United States, is that we're kind of mandated to have some kind of nutrient reduction strategy. And in our state, we like to have our farmers participate in this Kentucky Nutrient Management plan through establishing an ag water quality plan, because we want the farmer to own this program. This is his program. Other states actually force farmers to be certified to actually write their own plan or go through educational processes. We don't do that in our state at this point in time. So who can write a Kentucky Nutrient Management Plan? Extension personnel, our conservation district personnel, the farmer if he would like to do so. However, if a farmer is needing a comprehensive nutrient management plan, it can only be written by a TSP that's certified with NRCS. So, and as I said before, CAFOs need a comprehensive nutrient management plan that is a federal law, and large animal or animal feeding operations with violations. So in other words, if you had a manure spill and you had a big fish kill, you may be required to have a comprehensive nutrient management plan. So what's in a nutrient management plan and how do we develop one? So basically, there's lots of information that, somebody like myself, an extension agent or a conservation district personnel would ask you a lot of questions. So basically, they would ask questions about your operations. So what type of animals do you raise? How many animals do you raise? The age, like if I have 100 dairy cows and 25 heifers, I need age and weight, so their physiological state. How are they confined or raised? So, are they completely confined 24 hours a day? Or do those animals come up and eat for 3 hours in a covered situation where you would push manure and then go back out to pasture? How are your animal mortalities handled? This is part of the nutrient cycling on farm. Manure production. Do you have manure records? How do you apply your manure? Do you sell your manure? Do you have, are you cutting that manure into the surface? Or are you just, spreading it on top? Those type of situations, those questions need to be asked. We want field maps. We want our soil samples to correspond to our field maps. And every field that will or could receive manure needs an analysis of their soil. And we can take those soil samples up to 2 or 3 years, but after that, a good nutrient management plan can't be done unless you have more current soil samples. We would like a manure analysis that tailors your nutrient management plan for your farm, makes it more specific. We also need a crop rotation, a yield. Do you use a cover crop? Do you do no-till? So lots of different questions about what you're doing on farm. So as I said before, we're going to go through the points a little bit more specifically. So animals, so we want type, species, weight, time confinement, their diet. And I particularly ask this if it's beef cattle that are fed with distillers byproducts, because that jumps into a situation where our manure composition is not, we don't have good values for that. So if you are feeding distillers byproducts in large amounts, then we need to definitely need a manure sample from that. What's your facility like? Next, we want to know more about your manure system. Is it a covered stack pad? Is it just a heavy use pad if you're feeding beef cattle and you have a place where you're going to push your manure off your heavy stack pad or heavy use pad? Is it bermed or you're not going to push at all? The size and depth of your lagoon. How much stormwater do you have draining into your lagoon? Do you have good stormwater management? In other words, do you have gutters on your barn? Or is the clean water diverted from the dirty water? How many times is your stack pad cleared or your covered stack pad cleared or emptied, or is the lagoon empty? If you have a liquid manure management system, do you have a Kentucky no discharge permit, which you need by law? Do you keep records of the amount? Are you selling poultry litter? Are you composting animal manures? Composted manure is a lot different than just stacked manure that's been sitting there for a year. So those two things are way different. If you are selling litter, you need to have records of how much you sold and who you sold it to. As I said before, we need soil samples. So we take a look at our soil samples. In particular, we're looking at our phosphorus, soil phosphorus levels, because that will kind of dictate how much we can how much manure we can actually land apply. For example, down here, we have a phosphorus soil level at 850 M3. At this point in time, we are on a drawdown situation where we can't land apply manure. So until this gets down to, 400, there's no land application of manure because the soil phosphorus levels are too high. Something to consider. Manure analysis. So we want to know what our nutrients are in manure and make sure that they're reported in the fertilizer equivalent, P2O5 and the K2O, so we can compare apples to apples in our program. Next, we want a crop rotation for at least 3 to 5 years. Now, if you give somebody that's doing a nutrient management plan a crop rotation for 3 to 5 years, I want you to remember that that's not written in stone. This is something that you think that you're going to come up with for the next 5 years, but there's always market conditions and there's always weather conditions that are going to change that crop rotation. This is just something that you think that you're coming up with. But if you write a nutrient management plan with this crop rotation in there, it doesn't mean that you have to stick to that. Normally, if we're going to do a nutrient management plan for you, for every crop that's grown in that field over the 5 years, you will have an application rate. One thing that we do want to know is how you're spreading that manure. Is it liquid? Are you spraying it? Are you using a tanker? Are you incorporating it? How are you incorporating it? How many days from land application are you actually incorporating it? So some of our high liquid systems, it's actually incorporated, as it's sprayed on. Some people that are taking a manure spreader with solid manure need to come back and do a light disc over top to cut it in. It all depends on what kind of equipment you have on your farm and have the weather conditions and whatnot. We want to know field maps and acreage with your crop rotation. We also want to note if you have streams or ponds or sinkholes in your fields, we need to make sure that we have some setback distances and some conservation buffer zones around those areas. Do you cover crop? Do you harvest your cover crop? Are you no-till? Are you, to till? We want to know all that information. Other things that will be found in a nutrient management plan is basically a brief overview of what's going on the farm, how mortalities are handled. We're going to talk about, basic crops that are grown on the farm. Were manure samples suggested? We're going to have some suggested BMPs, for example, diverting, stormwater or putting a buffer system, maybe putting gutters on the barn or cleaning up around the litter shed and make sure there's not too much spillage. But we'll have a brief overview of what's going on the farm. Another thing that would be included in our nutrient management plan is make sure that if you're land applying and not selling, that you know what the required setbacks are. This is very important to know and Division of Water really wants you to kind of abide by these setbacks. So in conclusion, we basically make up a nutrient management plan to help farmers or farmers come up with a plan to do a better job at recycling nutrients. Because when you recycle nutrients on farm, you're actually saving money and becoming more profitable. But it requires a lot of different questions about, animal management and manure management and samples and soil samples and crop rotation, and they require permitting. And the program takes a little bit of practice to make it work efficiently, but we come up with some great information and some good application rates for our farmers. Thanks.